line of people waiting for their food. So luckily we padded the schedule in such a way that we can give them a little bit more time because the line's moving fast. So we're going to go to 12:30. So for those of you that have been here since 12, give a little fist pump for, being early. And those of you in line, we can't wait to get your butt in these seats so we can get started. And you're totally welcome to eat while we're talking. Right, it's 12:30. 12:30, and we're going to get started. So those of my wizards behind the black curtain who are still in line for food, I know you can hear me, so we're going to ask you to participate from your place in line and join us in quieting down. When you get your food, we've got several seats open for you over here, and we can't wait to see your faces. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jen Regan. I'm a board member of the Green Sports Alliance, and I'm a principal and chief sustainability officer of a consulting firm I run with my mother called We Bring It On. I'm going to give you more about my intro and more about what we're here to accomplish, but first I wanted to welcome up a founding ally of the Women's Sports and Environment Symposium. And first, we're lucky in the Green Sports Summit to have many of you not only as our members, but also as our sponsors, our partners, our collaborators. So if you're here, thank you. Because you're here because you care. I'm making some assumptions about you. I'm going to share them with you so you can correct me later. But if you're here, I'm making the assumption that you care. You care enough to say you care because you showed up at an event that has green in the name. You probably are the person at your organization that's willing to talk green and gets to answer a lot of questions that are sometimes unflattering, like what is the bumblebee in this urinal for? Or I think it's a very flattering question. So I want to acknowledge you for being here, for enrolling your business or finding the time in your budget to get here and be a part of the green sports movement. So whatever your role is, thank you. And those of you that are talking, I'm going to ask you to stop now. And if you know someone who's talking, this is your time to create a little physical contact, slightly touch them on the shoulder and say, hey, the program is starting. Thank you for doing that. Group participation. Okay, so before we get started, I want to invite up a longtime partner. Krista Volder is the principal of the sports business for HOK. And most importantly, before he received that promotion, which he rightly deserved, he's been a long-standing advocate of inclusion. So he's worked within sports to include the environment and include women, and I actually think including many different perspectives throughout his career. But personally at the Green Sports Alliance, we're lucky to have him serve as a co-committee chair for the Corporate Members Network, as the head of the Women's Sports and Environment Symposium. Him and his team at HOK have been willing to jump in and really dive into what it means to include the women in the design of a building and what it is to elevate the women employees in his business and support us in creating this conversation. So honored to have you as a partner. We get to hear a few remarks from him before we get started. Thank you, Chris.
Hey, good afternoon. Really? That's what you got? Jeez, good afternoon. Thanks for allowing me to be up here for just a minute. HOK is once again proud to be a partner of the Women's Sports and the Environment Symposium. It's important to us for all the reasons that Jen mentioned, but for me personally and selfishly, as the father of 2 teenage daughters, it's extremely important to have this conversation, not just today, but throughout the rest of the year. We at our house have faced a challenge since really November 8th of not being able to answer questions from that age group. Questions about why the country voted the way they did. Questions about why is the administration doing the things it is doing every single day. I don't have answers for that. And it's really frustrating. But I know what we can do is we can focus on a few critical issues. First one, I want to reference the new book by Paul Hawken, The Drawdown, 100 ideas on reducing climate change. Number 6, educating women and girls. It doesn't start at our age. It starts as young as they can talk. They see what we do, and they will follow what we do. Number 2, we have to empower everyone in all of our businesses that are here together, not just the males, not just the females, all genders, all races, all colors. We have to empower everybody. And third, I think most importantly, and we're going to hear from an amazing panel this afternoon, is we have to do a better job telling the story. What you see here is Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. It will open here in just under 2 months. It's pursuing LEED Platinum. I never thought saying pursuing LEED Platinum would become old hat, but we're in a LEED Platinum building today. We're going to see more and more of this. What struck us recently is looking at the core sustainability team. There's about 20 of us. This is the team. Hopefully the pictures speak for themselves. We have to tell the story. So again, thank you for allowing us to be a part of this conversation, not just today, but moving forward. And I can tell you at HOK, we're not going to let this administration get in the way. To them we say, bring it, and we're going to meet them head on. Jen, thanks.
So thank you to HOK, the NHL, and so many other sponsors and partners who continue to make the Women's Sports and Environment Symposium possible. So one of our panelists actually has a flight to catch because she's that badass. So we're going to move through to the panel a little quicker than expected, but I do want to set a little context. So one of the things that are unique, and actually we're going to set context for each other, who is here in the room? So how many of you, this is your first Green Sports Summit? Raise your hand and keep them up. Woo, look around, good job, okay. So now the next group, if you've been to a Green Sports Summit again, raise your hand. And now say welcome to everyone else whose hand isn't raised. Welcome. The Green Sports Summit is a tight-knit group of people who are dedicated to making a difference. We come together, we share best practices, we get to the bottom of it, we create a collaborative environment. And the Women's Sports and Environment Symposium is dedicated time for us to look through one lens, and that's the lens of women's leadership. And where can involving and elevating the women in our organizations or the women in our fan bases get us in the movement? How can we move the green sports movement with women? And how can we leverage the green sports movement to elevate women? So we look at it from the two lenses. But ultimately, someone asked me before the panel started, why is it still a separate event? It's not a separate event. Hi, men, we're including you. It's a dedicated time. And one of the things, just a quick brief history, we received this event as a gift from the EPA. And so in 2011 and 2012, and if my dates are off, someone will yell at me. I'm good. Yes. The EPA Council of Women and Girls hosted a Women and Environment Symposium at the White House, and several of us in the room were able to attend that event. And it was a unique platform and format for sharing information, a panel, and then engaging the audience in participation. Because our number one goal is to inspire you through our story and your story to take action. So our goal here is inspiration with the emphasis on you getting out of here inspired to take action. So that's our goal today, number one. There's some other little goals that we'll co-create together after the panel. So the number one thing here to remember is that you are equally as important as the people on the stage. So there are two ways we're going to have you engage. One, during the panel, if you have a question, you can write it down on a flashcard. Two, after the panel, this is going to flip over and we're going to have a very engaging dialogue. So Those of you that are sitting out there, enjoy your space now. We're going to move together because we're going to have some conversations after the panel. So if you want to move in now when the panelists take the stage, feel free to come on in and start to get settled. But a couple other things for context. Each year we try a different format in this symposium because each year we want to innovate. The past few years have been group brainstorming, and we've ended up looking at this question of women's inclusion from a very general, abstract point of view. And what we're realizing both internally here at the Green Sports Alliance and what we're observing and reading in trends is that even though the conversation of women's inclusion has increased in corporate America, across the United States, abroad, and here at the Green Sports Alliance, the numbers that we look at to measure our success still aren't showing change. So yes, women's leadership groups have convened for the last 5 to 10 years, but we still see a generous gap between men and women in the workforce. So just a couple stats, because I know some people like stats. At this moment, when you enter the work field, it's 54% men and 46% women. Decent balance. At the entry level, if you look at the VP level, and we have an entire panel of VPs, I'm raising the roof to celebrate your successes. At the VP level, 71% are men and 29% are women. When you also, I'll add, only 6% of that 29 are women of color. So only 29%. When you get to the C level, congratulations, C level members, 81% are men and 19% are women. And only 3% of those 19 are women of color. So for us, women's sports and environment, we want to go to the next level and get into the personal. Where do we connect to this? And so one of the unique things we've been doing since the start is we ask our panelists, I'll share a little bit about their bio, but we ask them to share 2 minutes of their personal story, how they got to where they are. That's because we want to start to make it personal, because these are uniquely talented people who have unique stories on how they got to where they are, regardless if they're women or men. So if you ever want to tell your personal story in your introduction at the Green Sports Summit, let us know. We're open to it. And then the second thing is we're going to start talking with you at the end of the panel. So the last thing I'll do before I introduce the panel is take the lead, my own personal intro. I said my name at the beginning. I'm Jen Regan. I'm a member of the Green Sports Alliance. My 2-minute personal story, I'll try to do it less than 2. I grew up in an entertainment family. My family had the world's largest collection of children's television memorabilia. So by the age of 7, I knew how to issue a press release, and I was standing beside my mom and stepdad out at public events with Woody Woodpecker and Sherry Lewis and all these amazing cast of characters. Most of you have no idea who I'm talking about. And from that, I started taking leadership positions in everything I did, and I realized I was absolutely passionate about justice and equality. And so for me, the most safe space to pour that passion without offending anyone was the environment. So I started doing environmental work because it was nonpartisan, and I worked for the nonpartisan Oregon League of Conservation Voters. I started working while I was in college. I ran the sustainability task force at my college. And when I graduated undergrad, I was like, I need a sustainability job. And I was one of those stubborn millennials that stood my ground and went for the job I wanted. And I worked my butt off, and I had great connections, and I got an introduction to AEG at a pivotal time and was able to help them build their sustainability program. I was there for 7 years. I love my AEG employees that are in the house. Hello, congratulations. And I built AEG One Earth, and then I went out on my own and started my own consultancy where I still advise on sustainability. So that's my background, my personal story, lots of passion. Also, survivor of domestic violence, and my mom came out as gay, so I got to really experience owning initiatives and putting my words to things that were personal and intimate at a very young age. And that has supported me in being a risk taker and supporting people and telling the untold story. So that's part of my personal story. That's my note that says the speakers are supposed to get on stage. So with that said, that's an example of one kind of personal intro. I'm going to give you a little bio while we bring our speakers on. You guys ready to rumble? Okay, so they're not being called forth in any specific order. The first person I'm going to announce, and you guys can sit as you want, is Shayna Dom, Vice President of Public Affairs and Community Relations for the San Francisco Giants. And if all the panelists can walk on stage now, it'll be good. Shayna has led an incredible career, and she'll tell us her own personal intro. But what's incredible right now is that in her role as Vice President of Public Affairs and Community Relations, she gets to work with the Giants on a whole host of inclusion and diversity initiatives, while also looking on their business, how they tell the story of their business while building their relationship in San Francisco. So I'm so excited to hear your own personal version of your intro. Next, we have Christina Gregory, Vice President of Marketing and Corporate Sponsorships for Constellation Energy. Christina oversees the branding, communications, and management for corporate sponsorships and key events with Constellation. She's been a leader in this space with their green sports work, and we're lucky to have built a long relationship with her. Then next, I will do this in order because you sat in order, pardon me. Gloria Navarez, Senior Associate Commissioner, Senior Woman Administrator for Pac-12, where she oversees and is responsible for the administration of the conference's senior women administrators, as well as oversees all sports with the exception of football, but all of the sports. So that's impressive. And finally, Joelle Terry, Vice President of Communications at Sacramento Kings. So Joelle was named to the Sacramento Kings in 2015. In this role, she leads business and basketball operations, communications, strategy, and execution, and is responsible for the team's digital media. And if you haven't had a chance to learn yet, this is one of the most progressive, inclusive venues that has ever been built. And so for you to lead the communications and the awareness of that is great job. So with that said, we're here to discuss how your organizations and your experience of innovating women's inclusion. So each of them are going to do their intro and share what their organizations are doing, and then we'll jump into Q&A.
Thanks, Jen. And I think you set the bar there with the passion, so I'll try to keep it going. My first job was just about 40 miles south of here. I grew up in Stockton. I was a gift wrapper in a ski shop. And it was my first job, and then I made my way to college at UC Davis, and really my first internship and real job was right here, not too far away, in the Capitol here in Sacramento, working in the Senate Appropriations Committee. So it's great to be here in Sacramento in this incredible facility. From my time at Davis and being here in Sacramento, I went to San Francisco. I worked in a law firm. I thought I was going to be a lawyer. I was going to change the world. It was in the mid-'80s, and I went to work for a law firm, and I decided the law firm changed me. I wasn't going to go into law, love all the lawyers out there and respect that profession, but I didn't have that passion, and I think it's the passion that you need to drive us in any of our careers. And so I went to work for a public relations firm because I thought about the skills that I had that I wanted to start to develop, and they seemed like they fit in this world called public relations. So I worked for a public relations firm for 5 years, working on issues and causes. So I thought, okay, I can make a difference. If I can't do it in law, I can do it through public relations. And I didn't want to promote products at the time. I wanted to make a difference and do causes and issues. So I worked for the PR firm, and I didn't really have a passion for some of the issues we were working on, but I loved the work. And so I went back and I got my master's in a brand new master's program that was starting at the University of San Francisco 20-something years ago, the Sports and Fitness Management program at USF. So at night I went to school. I had to do an internship. I thought, when am I going to do an internship? I have a full-time job in a PR firm that doesn't even know I'm going back to school. I'm going to school at night, and I was really fortunate because I was in the Bay Area at a time when we had, we still do, a number of professional sports teams which is where I went to do my internship with the Warriors back in the early 90s, and I had a phenomenal mentor who was a woman at the Warriors, one of the first women in media relations in any sport. Her name was Julie Marvel, so that's the answer to my question up there. But I went to work at the Warriors. From there, I was in the Bay Area at a time when we had a number of startup minor league teams, and that's where I got my chance. So from the Warriors, I went to the San Francisco Spiders, to the Oakland Skates, and if any of you can tell me who the Oakland Skates are or from the Bay Area, I'll give you tickets to a Giants game this year. From the Oakland Skates, I went to the San Jose Lasers, which was the predecessor to the WNBA, Women's Basketball League. And from there, as my husband will say, I'll never forget the day I walked home, and I walked in and he said, "You finally made it to the big leagues," in '99 when I joined the Giants to do all the media and PR for the last year of construction of the ballpark, and I've been at the San Francisco Giants now for 18 years. So that's hopefully under 2 minutes. And being at the Giants, I'm going right into my, right, okay. So when I look back on where I started as that gift wrapper and where I've ended up at the Giants, and I was counting as I was driving here this morning, I've had 14 bosses and mentors. 12 of them have been women. 2 have been men who have encouraged me every step of the way. So I think, and I look back, I also had a mom who worked as a special ed teacher for 30 years, and I remember she talking about her boss who was a woman. So in my career, I have never really had to, I haven't thought much about my gender because I've never seen or experienced firsthand anything besides strong women that I've worked with and women who've encouraged me. And one of my other mentors, a woman named Marlene Bjornsrud, who was co-founder of the Bay Area Women's Sports Initiative. Their motto is, if you can see her, you can be her. And I think I always saw her, and I became her and became me. So that is my journey. I think when we look at where I am at the Giants and the role that women play at the San Francisco Giants, I'm really proud to say that, and listening to Jen's numbers, 30% of our vice presidents are women. Our workforce, 47 full-time, 43% female, 57% males, so we're getting there, that it's 50-50. Women have a voice at the Giants, and I think that's really important because we need to have both voices there, male, obviously, and female. So almost half of our front office are women, and when you look at many of the things that we're doing at the Giants, our communications department is run by a woman, our CFO is a woman, in our SFG productions, our video team, our last Inside the Clubhouse production was all women produced, created, written. So women do have a voice. We just need to be seen. And I think that's what it's all, that's why we're here today, is to share these stories and to be seen and to get the stories out there. We also, it starts at the top, and we have an incredible leader in our CEO and our executive team with our president, Larry Baer, who believes that good people should be leading, and regardless of your gender. So there hasn't been an obstacle that I've experienced at the Giants when it comes to gender. So we have strong male leaders who are part of the team with us and bring us in. Some of the other things that we're doing at the Giants when we look at women, obviously in the front office, and I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about that, but look with our fan engagement. We have a number of programs. One that I'm really proud of that I've been involved with, and Gloria and I were just talking about this before I came up. We do a Girls' Day. It used to be called Women Driven, that started back in the Candlestick days in the late 1990s by a player, Jeff Kent, who wanted to create a day for girls at the park. He, of course, when he left the Giants and we moved to our new ballpark, the day went away for about a year or two. And then we said, wait, why aren't we doing a Girls' Day? And so we revived it, and we've been doing Girls' Day for the last 18 years at the ballpark every year, where we aren't seeing girls playing baseball yet, and maybe someday we will, but we have this incredible platform where we can show the girls in the stands. We can show all of our fans what girls are doing in our community, what women are doing. And so every year we recognize all the female athletes in the Bay Area who are achieving success in their various sports and endeavors, and we bring them to the ballpark and we honor them before a game. And we have actually taken the opportunity to combine that day with our Girl Scout Day, when we have 1,000+ girls in the ballpark, so they can see those girls that are achieving success, and they can dream and pursue their dreams just as those girls have. So we use our platform to raise awareness for a number of issues and causes, and we use it for girls as well. And then we also do a gamer day where we bring women into the park, and this was started by Mike Kruko, one of our broadcasters, to talk about baseball and to share their thoughts and perspectives and have discussions on the game. So we really do use our platform to be inclusive of all people in our community. And since our discussion today is about women and girls, we can talk more about that in a little while.
I don't know if this, okay. So I'm hearing great examples of internal inclusion, good balance, and then the external fan engagement. So thank you for that. And Christina.
I love the idea of the leadership story. I've been thinking about that a lot over the past year. And recently I was in a diversity cohort where we were talking about how women and men should be working more closely together and how they can and work. So I changed my leadership story to my women's story of how I've been successful and broken through in different opportunities. So when I think about my start, I'm an East Coaster, so I came a long way to get here, but I started out at Verizon, which rose to a Fortune 50 company while I was there. And what was so great is I started at the bottom, it was gritty, and you really had to work hard and find your voice and find your way. I was there pre-merger, so at the merger, they picked me up and took me to Dallas. And that was a really great pivotal point for me, where I had a leadership position to come down and be part of the merger, create part of the new Verizon brand, what that was, how to pronounce it. If you remember back then, people didn't know how to do that, and really break into that. But I remember as I was working there, I was in a group where I kept seeing men get promoted on top of me. And after a while, I wasn't sure I was going to be successful in that group. So I started looking around the organization. And I think what's so great about large organizations is it allows you to expand your opportunities and you see different groups. So I was able to move to another group. And shortly after, I was promoted there and had a lot of success in that position. However, now today, if you wanted to be successful there, you had to move, and we weren't ready to move, me and my husband. So I looked for a new opportunity, and they said if you had worked at a big Fortune 500 company, you couldn't be successful in a startup. This was during that whole .com days. So I decided to figure out if I had the strength of, if you don't have all the resources and the money and the budgets of a Fortune 500, could you be successful in a startup and be gritty and take on all the jobs and be a jack of all trades? And it was a really good opportunity for me. But what I learned there is my title kept changing, but my job never did. And I had to recognize where could I move and what could I do next to move forward. And I think too, what I learned at that point in time was, where could I be most successful as a woman and see opportunity in diversity? So shortly thereafter, I left and I started at Constellation, which is part of a large energy corporation here in the US. It's part of Exelon. And what's been so great there is they have a strong diversity culture, and I've been able to, I had to careers are a ladder. I took a giant step down and I worked my way back up to this opportunity. And really it's just waiting for doors, proving your wares, creating the credibility and the reputation within the organization to get to where we are, which is so strange that I'm in sports now from this perspective, and a whole panel full of women in sports. But it's been really exciting there, and it's been able to provide me a platform and an opportunity now at the VP level to work with other women and build our diversity in the organization. The other question was inclusion. So my company, Constellation's been working really hard on diversity. We've been focusing on that for quite some time. And because I do sports, it allows me a lot of opportunities to bring other people into sports, specifically women. So at Constellation, we're involved with the NHL, we're involved with the PGA of America, the PGA Tour. We do in Baltimore with the Ravens. So there's a lot of opportunity to bring women into sports. With all the golf that we do, what we started out was, let's start a bucket of balls. So I went to the CEO, I asked him for $30,000 for the summer to get women into golf. And we started with lessons for 6 weeks on Wednesday and then slowly built that up to 20 to 50 women now, and we've been doing that for a couple of years. So we've built up this kind of roster of women in the organization to get them into sports and to network the women across the organization. That got word. The next thing you knew, there was a Chicks with Sticks in Chicago. DC wanted to do something. They wanted to do something in Houston. So all these women started pulling together and networking to be part of this through sports. And then from there, we got all these women involved in golf and not afraid to participate in golf. And I'm actually leaving from here to be part of our sponsorship with the Women's PGA Championship, sponsored by KPMG, where all Exelon women from across the organization are participating. So I think that's an example of how do you reach across, how do you take diversity and then create inclusion for women. It's once you bring diversity in, it's a great start, but you have to have inclusion to get people to stay. And I think about that leadership story that I had where I felt like I was in a group, but I could never get promoted, that now it's my turn to make sure as women come in, how do you ask the question, how's it going for you? Is there something I can help you with? Can I connect you with somebody? Why don't you try this? Give them a chance to lead, get women involved and at the table as much as possible. So I think from that perspective, I've learned along my way, I think your story too is about perseverance. How do you just keep gritting it out? And I don't think, initially I would think of myself as a woman trying to grit it out, but just as a business person doing that. But now that I look and we talk about how do you look at women different in sports and different in business, that we do need to be asking those questions and bringing people along.
Awesome. So Christina's kind of paving the way for a question everyone's going to get to answer later about how have you, and we're not going to answer it right now, but we are going to be answering the question on the stage. What has been, have you looked at yourself as a woman in your career, and how has your perspective on your career changed now that you do look at yourself that way? So we're going to get back to that question. It's a good one. I want you to know it's dangling in this space, but first let's hear from Gloria and Joelle.
Hello, my name is Gloria Navarez, and I thank you all for coming and engaging in this conversation first and foremost, because I think that's the first step. My personal journey started by in the Bay Area, played softball and basketball, and eventually earned a basketball scholarship to the University of Massachusetts. So this California kid went all the way to the East Coast with nothing but flip-flops and a windbreaker and played basketball for 4 years. Majored in sports management, because that's what my coaches put me in. I didn't learn until about halfway through my freshman year you could actually choose your own major. Oops, dumb jock. Had a really fun career at University of Massachusetts, and then I came back home, took a year off, and said, you know what, let's go to law school. So I went to the University of California and spent 3 years there. About the third year in law school, I realized I don't know if I want to be a lawyer. And then I graduated and had a lot of debt. And then I said, maybe I should be a lawyer. So I practiced labor litigation for about half a minute, and then I realized I don't want to be a lawyer. So similar to your story, appreciate the lawyers out there, just wasn't, the billable hour wasn't what I was thinking about. So I went, took a 50% pay cut, had to move in with my boyfriend at the time, take a loan from my parents, and started working in college athletics. I was the first full-time compliance person at San Jose State University, and compliance in athletics is all about the recruiting rules and the NCAA manual, and with the law background, somebody with zero experience was able to land a job. So I worked at San Jose State. I then went to back to UC Berkeley in their athletic department and was their compliance person. 27 sports, 900 athletes, and I was the only compliance person. I had no assistance whatsoever. Fast forward in my career at the University of Oklahoma, we had 8 full-time compliance people, all with law backgrounds, and 2 administrative assistants in that unit. So that field has come a long way, and I think I benefited by being one of the first on the scene. After California, I went to the West Coast Conference office, and that's when I transitioned from campus to conference. But then, much like my journey to the East Coast, I went running back to campus and ended up at the University of Oklahoma. And that was when my sustainability light bulb went on. Being from the Bay Area, we had curbside recycling. We don't even know what styrofoam is really when it comes to cups and flatware. But at the time, that was not yet common practice in Norman, Oklahoma. I actually had to take all my wine bottles in my car down to the recycling center. My husband's very into wine. So I started at the University of Oklahoma, their first green team, and it began my learnings about, although I'm not a sustainability expert, I know nothing about the science, I just know what I live and feel is right, that a lot of people have a passion for it. A lot of people want to do things around it, but without the empowerment from senior level administration, it's very hard to get the organization to move. So by getting the blessing of our athletic director at the time, Joe Castiglione, we started a green team. And in 1 year, we completely started recycling in the football stadium. We revamped all of our products when it came to paperworks, the kitchens, the cleaning. And it was really easy because people already knew the way. They just didn't have the forum with which to get the blessing to do it within the context of athletics. Now, we were Oklahoma and we had a lot of resources behind a lot of these initiatives, so it was a lot easier. After being 3.5 years at the University of Oklahoma, I came back to the Bay Area, and now I'm at the Pac-12 conference office. And as we discussed earlier, I oversee all sports and championships except for football, which basically means we put on all the events, we make sure schools play nice together, we administer the coaches' meetings, the officiatings, and just put out fires. But we also have an opportunity to bring sustainability into a league platform. So our way of innovating in the sustainability space and also in the gender area really starts with Larry Scott, who is our commissioner. He hired me to oversee men's basketball specifically. I'm the only woman at a Power 5 conference who works with men's basketball. I think a common theme when people meet me is, oh, you work in the Pac-12, do you work with women's basketball? And I said, no, I actually work with men's basketball. So there's still in, I think, college sports and at the higher levels of administration, just a lack of understanding or expectation that women do serve in roles of leadership position with men's sports, basketball, and football. We talk about inclusion and talking about women in sports. I was reading an article in the Seattle Times interviewing Jennifer Cohen, who's the new athletic director at the University of Washington. And I want to share a quote from her because I feel it kind of articulates how I feel about being a woman in sport. She said, I don't like talking about the fact that I'm female. I get that we have to talk about it because there's not enough diversity of women leading college athletic departments. But that's not how I identify myself, because I think it creates a stereotype. I'm proud that I can be a role model for people but that's not my identity. And I think that rings true, because I think there's a difference between stereotyping women in sports and being a role model for women in sports. And I think you touched on it and how you elevate the women in and around you to move on to those positions. At the Pac-12, our network airs many, many sports. 50% of those are women's and Olympic sports, creating exposure for those platforms. Larry Scott, our commissioner, has taken a chance, putting me on men's basketball and putting other women in leadership roles. Lydia Murphy-Steffens is the head of our Pac-12 networks. Danette Layton is my colleague. She overheads our marketing and communications department. So I think it stems from the top as far as inclusion. And then for me, it really is having both genders in the conversation, because women can talk to women all they want about being inclusive, but until we have male role models and advocates with us in the conversation, we're not going to move the needle. So that is my journey and a quick synopsis of our Pac-12.
Thank you so much, Gloria. And last but not least, Joelle is in her home court and hosting us so graciously. I heard a lot of great stuff there, especially lack of understanding and expectation that women will serve as leadership. That is a strong misconception, and I love that you just called that forth. That's something we'll go back to. But Joelle, thank you.
Thank you, and welcome everyone to Golden One Center. We're so happy to be hosting the summit this year, and feel like, and we'll get to it a little bit later, but sustainability was a major part of what we wanted and our owner wanted to do when we were opening this arena. So I can talk a little bit about that in a moment. But first, my story. I started out in Democratic politics, is actually a strong part of my background. So out of college, I was lucky enough to work on the John Kerry campaign. Unfortunately, we did not win, and I went into consulting afterwards, but political consulting back here in California, working a lot on sustainability causes, actually, and green, and one of my major clients was a fuel cell client, so working on that. And then I went on to work on the Obama campaign and did the announcement tour in Iowa and New Hampshire. He became the nominee and obviously went on to the White House, so I worked in communications on the Obama campaign, working out of Chicago. And then I went to DC and helped plan the inaugural committee, or the inaugural celebration. Planned all of the press logistics for that, and then ended up in the White House. It was unlikely. I didn't expect to end up in DC when I started out on the Obama campaign, but was very lucky to end up there and excited about the role. I worked there for about 3 years. I worked as the head of, I managed message events for the president, so any domestic policy events that we did, I was in charge of what we were doing, where we were doing it, why we were doing it in that specific location. So if we were on a factory floor, it was there for a specific reason. They were an example of how they were going to get government funding. We had made sure that there was people in the audience and participating in the event that were examples of what we were trying to do policy-wise. I moved on from there and went on to work in government communications for Comcast, NBC Universal, and was there for several years. And I ended up wanting to come, I was in DC, wanted to come back to California. I did not think that I would end up coming back to Sacramento, and I'm from Sacramento, so I am back home here, but came back to Sacramento at a moment when it was a pivotal moment for the city, in that we were opening the new arena that we're sitting in today. And so wanted to come back at a moment that was transformational for the city. So that was very exciting to come back and do something for my hometown. I am now, as she mentioned, the head of communications for the Sacramento Kings, overseeing business and basketball communications, as well as digital communications, and community involvement as well. So I have an incredible team, and very excited to have you guys all here today. It all starts at the top. I know several people have mentioned that, but our owner and chairman, who will be speaking later this evening, Vivek Ranadive, has set out a mission to be very inclusive and a progressive franchise. And so that started from the beginning with his vision. He wanted this to be the most sustainable arena, and we have achieved that in terms of being LEED Platinum. He wanted it to be inclusive on all levels. So we have breastfeeding pods for our fans. We also were the first building to have all gender restrooms from the construction. So those are several of the things that we've done. At our leadership level, we have I'm lucky enough to sit on an executive committee, or our executive leadership team, where four of the people on the team are women. So that includes our COO, our head of marketing, who is here today, and myself and our head of HR. So it's incredible that we have nearly 50% of our executive team is women. So that gives a unique perspective to the direction that we're doing. It says a lot about what our owner has wanted to include in our organization. So yeah.
Exciting. Well, thank you all so much. And the reason we invited each of you to speak is not only because of your personal story, because you work with organizations that are in a leadership position. So as you each reflected, the general statistics of where we are as a country, where we are as corporate America, is not reflected by your organization. So it is great, and our intention here is to really hear where the perspective is at these leading organizations and with the women in leadership positions in these organizations. A couple powerful themes. If you can see her, you can be her. Actually, we want to check in. I promised the panelists we'd find out a little bit more about you. So before they answer the questions, can we just see who here in the audience is a venue operator or a sports team operator? Someone who works on venue or the sports team? Raise your hand. Awesome. Thanks. Just get a sense. And how many of you here are service providers? You provide a service to a venue or a sports team. Thank you. And our NGO folks in the house. Okay. And then did the league people not raise their hands for sports team? Raise your hands if you didn't. Okay, so we get a good sense. It's a good spread. And how many of you are diversity and inclusion learners? Like, you go to every training or session that you can, like every single one. Let's see. Okay, awesome. So not that many hands, so I thank you for being here. How many of you are in the exploration? So you're really just discovering the topic and learning. Okay, great. Not that many hands in general. So how many of you are in the middle? So just give a sense of comfort around the topic. So the concept, if you can see her, you can be her, is a really strong notion that's out there in the space around inclusion, is that our comfort level, our willingness to take risks as individuals are based on what we've seen before us. And that not only impacts women, but people of color. If they can't see people like them, they don't know to dream that way. So that's a beautiful, powerful comment. I love, Christina, how you were talking about where can you grow, that was the fundamental question for you in your journey. Where can I grow? And really reflecting on the factors that where you were growing and where you weren't, and that fueled you. The lack of understanding expectation while women will serve. That's another fundamental disconnect. A lot of people say women aren't choosing leadership positions because of motherhood or other areas. And then both genders get to be in the conversation. So something that a lot of more progressive organizations are doing, not only are they having co-ed conversations, hi co-ed audience, they are also having men's conversations about their role in women's groups, so in elevating women. Now, did one of you say that your organization hosted a men's conversation about it? Yeah.
So I think during our prep, 2 weeks ago was in a cohort of 22. The conference was called White Men as Allies. And there were 5 women, there was a handful of people of color, but it was mostly, I work at a utility, bald white men. And I think they came in very defensive, wondering what this was all going to be about. I thought I was going to share my perspective from a women's side, and it ended up being 4 very intense days. We started at 7 a.m. and went till 9:30 p.m. for 4 days straight, really talking about what it's like from different perspectives. And it really wasn't about white men, you have to bring everybody else around and have that like thought, but it really was, how do you become sensitive to everyone's unique story? And making sure you give everyone a chance, and to thinking about those questions. So I think I'm very lucky to be in an organization, for one, that could actually do a cohort like that. I think if I look back 5 years ago, we were just starting our diversity and inclusion journey with action learning teams and women's conferences to start building that, and now to come to a part where they're doing a handful of these cohorts of officers. So I think a few of you said from the top, so it's an officers cohort to really figure out how to make everybody be more open to inclusion.
Thank you for that. So absolutely, this is a dedicated time for us as a co-ed space, but there's actually several studies about women's only and men's only conversations being a place of safety for people to really discover what they think about these topics or what their experience is, because so many of us don't even have a place to talk about it, that we don't even know or know to look through that lens, which actually brings us to the next question that I kind of already floated. But before we do our questions, as a reminder, if you have questions for this panel, let's see, who are my volunteers with flashcards? So we've got some volunteers with, this is Haley, is it Haley? This is Haley, everyone. Thank you, volunteer. So we have some flashcards and pens. If you need a flashcard, I'm not sure where they are, but Haley's gonna sort that out. And yeah, if you have questions, you can come up to Haley, make sure she gets them to us before we're done. So I hear this tension, we have this great tension. Did we, how aware are you as a professional woman of your role and your journey as a woman? And so the way we worded it, what has been your journey to acknowledging your role as a woman? And now that you are at this moment in acknowledgement, how has your view of that changed? How has it impacted your professional career?
So, I kind of dovetailing off what we were just talking about before, not only am I female, but I'm also ethnic minority. So being Mexican American, if there's an initiative about diversity, if there's an initiative about gender, I'm asked to serve, speak, be involved. I'm on a board. I can't tell you how many of these diversity, gender, especially in sports, because there's so few of us, boards and committees that I serve on, meanwhile also trying to do my full-time job. So one of the pieces of advice I give when people ask me to engage in these things is diversify your own group to some degree, first. And second of all, focus on the hiring process. Especially in sports, everyone knows it's mostly about who you know. The last 3 jobs that I got weren't posted. In other words, there was no public posting. I either talked to a search firm or I talked to the hiring person directly, and 2 weeks later I was hired. So it really is, if you're a hiring entity, especially these higher levels, being committed to diversifying your pool, not being committed to hiring a woman or a minority just because, but diversifying the pool so more people get in, can talk to you, get exposed to the other managers in your organization, and get the experience of interviewing. Because I think that really helps. It's like the Rooney Rule in the NFL, but helps broaden your network of candidates, and as well helps that candidate pool get in the practice of interviewing and being in front of hiring entities.
I would just add on to that, or to share my story. I would say I don't think I really ever thought about my gender until the last year or so, or until I've had younger women in the organization coming to me for advice for issues that they're confronting. If it is that they're starting to think about starting a family, and I've raised 2 daughters. I have a college-age daughter and a sophomore in high school, and how was I able to balance the work that I did? And if you look, I mean, the men in our organization have balanced it as well, but they're not as comfortable going to possibly some of the men because they deal with different issues as a woman. And so I don't think I ever really thought about it until this last year, and within the last 2 weeks, and you asked me to be on this panel 3 or 4 months ago, we just established a women's symposium at the Giants that met last week. And then I was asked to be on our diversity and inclusion task force that had our first meeting last week, and we'll have another one tomorrow. So all of a sudden, I'm thinking about it, and I'm thinking, oh, what's my story? Because I just feel like my gender was not a factor in my career development. And now that I'm reflecting back, I think it was an asset in many situations, because that's why there are 2 genders, because we both bring very unique, diverse assets that make this world work, sometimes better than others. And I think that as I look, probably on the next 10 years of my career, because I want to enjoy some time in retirement, that it probably is more of my role to think about gender and to make sure that the women and the men that are going to carry on the work that we're doing are comfortable in their roles, and hopefully we'll learn and continue this progress where we won't have to have diversity inclusion task force in another 10 or 15 years. And I know there's so many women and men who came before me that created the path and the opportunities I have because they did have to fight and their voices had to be heard. And maybe my voice hasn't been as strong, and now I need it to be strong for this next generation in a different way. So we all contribute. And so I feel like I'm just really starting to think more about that role at this, halfway or more than halfway probably through my career.
I just wanted to add quickly, I think when men start their careers, they know it's going to be a 40-year journey until the end. And I think for women, when we start our careers, we're not sure it's going to be a 40-year journey. So I don't know if I was thinking, what were those doors that I was going to take along the way? And I think that's the difference now for me when I look back, is I didn't know if this was going to be my path, and through perseverance, it's become that way. But I think about my husband, and he had that 40-year career journey, and he knew that from day one. So I think that's part of the change of the mindset, is to really know what you want to do and go after it and make those opportunities happen and speak your voice. I think in a leadership role now too, I always tell the younger women, say what you want. If you want the CMO job, you need to say that. People can't read your mind. And it's important to really think that through and be vocal about it.
I think I would agree with you. Throughout my journey and every job I've had, whether it was in politics, in corporate America, or now here, I have had strong women leaders. So I actually haven't thought, I've been probably the product of being mentored by strong women, and now in a leadership role, and beginning to look at that and what that means for what I'm doing and how I'm interacting with other women throughout our organization, how we're identifying opportunities to promote women and make sure that they stay with the organization, whether that's having flexible work schedules or announcing a program where women who have had children can bring their babies to work for the first 6 months. So I think that having been a product of strong women leaders throughout my career, which looking back on it is somewhat remarkable, I think, now, but I didn't think about being a woman at all. It was just all about kind of getting to the next role. Like I wanted to continue to have more of an impact, to continue to take on more responsibility, and was always looking for the next opportunity to do that. For me, it meant moving around from campaigns and moving around to different jobs often rather than moving up within the organization. But now being in a leadership position at an organization, really looking to identify ways to promote women and encourage women is something that we're beginning to look at.
Great questions from the audience, so keep them coming. So just off the tail end of that one, being in organizations that have higher percentage of women in leadership positions, how has the inclusion of women in your organization, especially at all the levels, changed the culture and decision making? And maybe if you could pull from your experience at this organization versus previous organizations in your career.
I mean, I can just say, as more women have become in leadership positions, there is definitely a different voice. I think when I sit at the table, being in an energy company, I'm full of engineers. So I'm always sitting at a table full of engineers, and I have a communication, marketing brain think, and I think how differently I approach problems, solutions, challenges, when we go after projects, how me or my team or other women at the table think about it. So I think when I am at the table, I've recognized now and owned that I'm sitting with different thinkers, and I think that's been helpful.
I agree. I think that perspective is important and that everyone brings a unique perspective, whether or not it's your family background or, for me, actually, I'm in a little bit of a different position. I don't have kids, and so part of what I will be thinking about is how are we encouraging women to stay in who do have families, but also encouraging women. One thing that one of my former bosses actually told me, who was a woman, and it was one of the most important things, was to own the work-life balance, and I'm sure that we'll get to that next, but whether or not you have a family, and oftentimes women who don't have kids will be leaned on to contribute more when people do take time. And I think that it's important for women, even if you don't have a family, to take the time that you need to do personal things as well. So continuing to have work-life balance is important as well.
I think that's a perspective that I've seen at the Giants. Our president's right-hand advisor is a woman, who is my boss, our head of communications, and we often talk that women, I think, make time for that work-life balance, and that has rubbed off on our male colleagues who were afraid to take vacation, or it wasn't cool to say they were going away with their family for 2 weeks in the middle of summer, in the middle of baseball season, but that's the only time when your kids are off school. And that's when you have to take vacation. And are you going to go through your 30 or 40-year career and never have taken a summer vacation with your kids because baseball got in the way? And now men and women, we're all taking vacation when it works for our families. And there's other of us back, at the ballpark to make things run. So I think it rubs off on some of the more traditional male stereotypes, or men who it wasn't cool to take vacation, it wasn't cool to spend time with your family, and they're seeing that, hey, the women have got it right, so let's catch up and let's be right in there with them.
You can if you, yeah. Made me cough. Thank you. What's interesting, and I think, like I mentioned at the beginning, this is dedicated time to talk about the perspective of women. But when we look at these stats that I've pulled about employment and where women are in the workforce, there's a general issue right now we have that's not just gender, but it's also about the change in our workforce as millennials are the larger group, and it's around engagement and work-life balance. But both men and women of the millennial generation, there's lots of great statistics, want work-life balance. And so really, it's about reframing the conversation from feminine and masculine professional traits, but to effective and ineffective leadership qualities. So right now, we're looking through the lens of what we've discovered as women, and especially in organizations that focus on women, but really what are effective components of inspiring and including all aspects of our workforce. And so I kind of hear that theme in your own journeys, but there are unique talents that you as women have brought and that women bring, and it's that how do we benefit, which is the kind of last point. How do the men benefit from embracing some of the things that the women's perspective has added to the workforce? And I think we're not here to have an age conversation in terms of which perspectives, but the millennials definitely want more work-life balance. It's not just a female woman's issue anymore, but it had been. So we got so many great questions. Luckily, they're in some themes, so I'm trying to distill this. One of the big themes here, would be, it sounds like a key ingredient for all of you has been the top leadership support. So for those in the audience especially that don't have that top leadership support yet, what are some advice and strategies? I already know, I hear wisdom in Christina's comment about making what you want known and owning your voice, but what is some wisdom or specific strategies you might share on how to create space if you're not at that leadership level, how to ask for or start to invite this conversation into your workplace? No easy questions here. We just go right for the jugular.
So we talked about this a little bit in the prep for this panel about, whether we had mentors or heroes in the sports world coming up. And I'm one of those people that always struggle with that question because I don't think I really did. I had people who gave me a chance, but I heard one time from a colleague that one of her best mentors used to invite her along to close big fundraising deals. Fundraising wasn't her area. She didn't have a role in that meeting, but she was in the room, saw it happen, and experienced it. So I think my 2 cents would be, if you don't have that, and many college sports has a long way to go. We don't have a lot of women leading college programs at the highest levels. We have a problem in retaining coaches just because of the work-life balance and the hours that are required. But I would reach out to those who have done it in the field, because there's a cohort of us that make ourselves available no matter what. And I think other people who have achieved some of those positions can help you be a voice, because it's a very small community, especially in the collegiate space and in sports generally. So if it's not in your immediate company or industry, I do believe those resources are out there in peer companies, conferences, teams, leagues.
And I don't think you can get away with it now. I think there has to be diversity and inclusion, and I think it does have to start finding its way at the top. If you think today trying to bring in new workforce or look at millennials or the work-life balance, I like to call it lifestyle instead, because you have to blend your life with your work and not in an hour-by-hour unit situation. But I think today, companies that aren't thinking about inclusion are going to be left behind.
And I think you can have a leader at the top who is inclusive, but you might have a manager who is not. And I think you've just got to, as a communications person, as someone, you've got to go to your HR department, you've got to go to another manager, to another colleague that you feel comfortable with, for your voice to be heard and to ask the questions. And I think so many people don't forget to communicate or intimidated to communicate, but I think it's finding the person in your organization, and it may not be your direct boss because you can't speak to him or her, but it's finding someone else who then can advocate for you. And I get lots of people who show up in my office, and just like Gloria said, find that person that you're comfortable with.
So just to add into this, as in our research and our work, if whoever asks, there's several questions about specific examples. Follow up with me or any of Natalie or Danya from the Green Sports Alliance. We have a lot of resources we can provide you in terms of how to start the conversation. Google has a great website about their unbiased consciousness training. It's all available online and free. And I think what I would add to is that as someone who's advocated for change in organizations where there hasn't always been support for it, sometimes going to HR, absolutely, because at this point, if you can go to HR, you need to ask, but coming ready to add value to the conversation. So are you willing to do the online research and be the person to host and facilitate the lunch conversation? Are you willing to, so asking and offering at the same time, saying, I'm willing to be a part of it, I'd like it to happen, I'm willing to volunteer my time. That's always a good,
I actually went to an event last week. It was put on by the Bay Area Business Times, and it was honoring the most influential woman in Bay Area business. And there were 130 women that were recognized. It was a really powerful event, and every one of them, in 1 hour, they recognized 130 women, and the women had like 30 seconds to give their advice. And there was all kinds of great advice, but the one that stood out was the woman who owned her own company, and she said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, then just bring a folding chair. And I've just been thinking about that because it was perfect for today, but in all of my committees, and it's really true that you can find a way there. You just have to be creative.
Absolutely. So with that said, honoring time, I'm going to transition into our 36 and closing wisdom. But what we're going to do, there's several great questions here. And so don't go anywhere. We're going to lose one person in the room, and that's one person, but everyone else stays, because what we're going to do is take some of these final questions, and you're going to have a chance to answer them together. So if your question's up here, you haven't heard it answered, it's not done yet. With that said, there is not enough time to mine from your experience. You have great organizations, and you yourselves have had incredible careers. I have learned so much from these women in our preparation for this panel. Love to continue to have you engaged as thought leaders and get you time in front of this great audience. I'm sure there's lots more questions for you. But if you can share closing comments, where in terms of innovation and action, what's next for your organization, or what you think as a call for us as an industry in terms of our organizations, what's next? So I heard some specifics, like definitely in terms of hiring practice, got to advance the diversity pool, do whatever it takes in terms of hiring, get more people in the places. So we already have some thoughts coming through, but in your own words, what's next, what's innovation, and any final little words of wisdom, if you want to go, who wants to start us off? We don't have to go in line.
I can start off with the words of wisdom. I was just thinking about your folding chair comment. When I worked at the White House, there was often meetings where there would be, they call it principals meetings, and staffers would sit kind of in the backbench position. And one time I went to a meeting and there wasn't any of the backbench positions where I normally sat, and so I kind of hesitated to sit at the table. And the woman I was there with said, yes, of course, sit here. But afterwards, she told me, remember that you're not at the table. Like, it's okay to say something when you're there, to use your voice, and to make sure that what you're saying, you have a unique perspective and you have something of value to add. So it's not only to have a seat at the table, but to raise your hand, to lean in, to make sure that what you're saying, understanding that you do have a unique perspective to add, and what you have to add is important and valuable.
Again, inspiring, my closing thoughts is, in the position I am now, I'm asked to spearhead a lot of initiatives and work on a lot of projects, but as a single leader in the organization, I only have so much political capital, and we all know how we have to be careful about how we use that. Do I use it on my diversity initiative? Do I use it on my gender initiative or my greening initiative? Or do I use it to try to get a basketball schedule approved, which is what I get paid for? So I think my call to action or closing comments would be, don't just leave it to the female minority person on your staff, but if you have some extra political capital laying around, maybe ask that person if they could use a hand.
I think there's been a lot of talk about diversity for many, many, many years now, but I think we're at a tipping point now where action is going to start, and I think for me, what's important is to stop thinking about it as statistics, diversity slate, and all these things that we must do, and actually start telling the story and start asking people how they can participate and show the true action of those next steps. I think that's what's going to change now, is all these things that we've been talking about for, it feels like years and years and years, especially being a woman, to finally getting to a point where it's a time of action and making those decisions, bringing people along, and having it be part of the thread of the conversation.
I think I'm just really encouraged that we're having this dialogue today, that just in my world in the last month or so with the different committees that have been formed, that there's this conversation that's being had, and I love that when all the women in our office were off at our meeting 2 weeks ago, we had a number of men texting, what are you talking about? What's going on there? And that was part of the conversation, and I liked that one of the first things in that meeting with all the women we said was, one of our goals was, we want the men to be included in this conversation, and I know we said that early on, but that it's being inclusive and not exclusive, and that the generations that are coming behind us, that hopefully they won't have to be talking about this in another 10 or 20 years, that the conversation will be on to something else.
I just want to add to that. It's funny, I had a colleague, male colleague, speak at a women's conference on a panel called Men Who Get It. And he was telling his daughter about this panel, and she said, "Dad, you don't get it at all." So I think the panel really ended up about being, we all don't get it, and how can we all be better at it?
Amazing transition for us, because we all don't know what we don't know until we start having a conversation with someone else other than ourselves who might know something different than us. So I'd love a huge round of applause. Let's fill this arena with noise. Our panelists are going to exit the stage, and we're going to wish safe travels to Christina on her way to the KPMG Exelon Women's Golf Gathering. It's going to be incredible. And our other panelists are going to stay in the room. So if you're moving in the audience, hopefully it's because you're going to move to sit next to someone. So for the remaining few minutes, we're going to go through some of the questions. So you ladies are welcome to leave. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And now is your time as an audience. Keep clapping. They totally deserve it. To make sure you're sitting next to somebody, preferably someone you didn't know too well before today. So we are literally, if you're not sitting next to someone, and I can see you because you're in a stadium seating, now is the time to get close, because you're going to have one-on-one conversation. So you're going to have a partner A and a partner B. And yes, this is not an icebreaker. This is a chance to exchange and kind of synthesize what we heard. So we have 15 to 20 minutes left together to conclude the experience and make sure. So I know whenever we have movement, we have a lot of talking. People want to leave. But guess what? You get to stay in your seats and stay connected. So everyone got their partner. I see a lot of talking. I know I'm asking, how many of you guys like to follow rules? Let's raise hands. No, you don't, because you're rabble-rousers. But as rabble-rousers, you need to connect to those who are other rabble-rousers. So let's go ahead and rabble-rouse back into our seats. Let's see. This is going to be fun. I'm looking at you, Lee. Okay. So if you're staying to participate in this final piece, you're sitting down. So if you're not sitting down right now, are you leaving, or are you just finding your buddy? Okay, great. So if you are standing, my request is you're not speaking. So even if you're leaving, we really appreciate your joining us. But those of us that are going to continue, we're going to ask that you be quiet for us so we can continue together. So I'm going to even ask, so our speakers are sticking around till the end. So if I can ask you guys to sit down, trust that you'll have a chance to meet them. I don't believe in shushing, but I do believe in presence. Okay, so heard some really great things. So right now you should be sitting next to someone you don't know. Yes. Some of you are in threes. Some of you are alone. That's okay. There's a group up there. So now's a chance for you to introduce yourself. So I'm going to time this because we have 2 more things to do together. So you're going to have 30 seconds to say your name and to share something interesting about you, about how you got to where you are, 1 to 2 sentences. So you have 30 seconds each person. So you're in pairs of 2. So one person's going to go first. That person is partner A, and you're going to raise your hand right now. If you're going first, tap the person next to you. And now if you're going first, raise your hand. Awesome. This is fun. We're going to just do this over quickly. So you have 30 seconds. The first person, partner A, is going to say your name and something interesting about how you got to where you are in your career right now. 30 seconds starts now. It's another one, same one. All right, and bringing that to a close, partner A, the first person. Okay, partner B, the second person, your turn. If you haven't already, to say your name. I didn't do the math for 3 people, so I apologize if you're 3. You're going to have to handle this math on your own. 30 seconds, say your name and something interesting about how you got to where you are in your career. Announcement about Coors Light. Yeah. In one place? You can just get rid of that Coors Light. Okay. Good. Okay, and bring that to a close. So now you know a little bit more about each other, a little bit about your personal story. You are officially all panelists in our event. Thank you for sharing your personal story. So, our goal was to inspire action and to really have each of you reflect on what you can do either in your organization or personally. And so now is a moment for each of you to discuss. I'm going to give you a time limit. What diversity and inclusion initiative, specifically around women, or this is going to be a hybrid for one of our guest questions, has most inspired you or has been most effective that you've experienced or heard about? Okay, so take a moment to think about this. You're about to share with each other the most effective or impactful or inspiring diversity and inclusion initiative you've experienced or heard about. Could be something you heard today around women and or any diversity and inclusion initiative. So you're about to share. Each of you gets 30 seconds to share. I'll let you know how the 30 seconds go. Some people are laughing at this, but we got to make sure everyone gets a chance to share. So I'm going to count off the time. Each of you get 30 seconds to share. You're going to have 90 seconds total because some of you are in threes. You're going to share the most inspiring, most effective, or most impactful diversity initiative you've heard about or experienced. Diversity and inclusion initiative. Ready? Everyone clear on that? So we're going to go laser rapid fire, and then we're going to take some sharing. So with that said, start now. I forgot to tell you guys to switch. So if you haven't switched to speaking or sharing, make sure you switch and everyone gets a chance to share. Okay, and bring that to a close. Thank you for participating in a timed exercise in a large group conference. So you're going to bring that thought to a close because now we all get to hear some of these ideas. So as you can tell, I'm shifting our schedule around to accommodate some changes. And with that said, I know you guys are so engaged. So we're going to start to bring it in. If you notice one of your teammates are still talking, tap them kindly so they know it's time to bring it to a close. And Haley, our fearless volunteer, is going to run the mic. So now that you guys have shared your experiences with the most innovative and inspiring diversity inclusion, let's take some sharing. 3 people. So who wants to share an initiative that they're super fired up about, something that they've learned from someone else or that they're doing that they would like to see implemented elsewhere? So either something you just learned or you heard about. So go ahead and raise your hand, and Haley will run the mic to you. I like this, some nerves. I didn't expect this from you guys.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for this symposium. It's been wonderful. My name is Kathleen Hackett. I own Pop Mama Pop. It's an artisan-flavored kettle corn company. And I was at the NRDC Awards a couple of years ago in Berkeley. I'm from the Bay, so I'm just 70 miles away from here. And they were honoring Sibella Kraus as well as White Oak Ranch somewhere not here. And the one thing that I took away from that was that this man said, I can always do better. I can always do better. So for me at the time, that was finding a compostable packaging, that was using local farmers to grow me my heirloom kernels, that was streamlining my supply chain, that is employing my community, that is partnering with organizations that have similar goals and mindsets as I do. So as a female business owner and as a participant in my community, I can always do better. So I'm here to learn how to do that as well.
Awesome. So what I'm hearing you say is to inspire people to always do better and to create a culture. If I was to translate that, and what we could do is to create a culture of encouraging our employees to always do better. So creating a safe environment for them to make recommendations, to put proposals. For those of you that are wondering how to inspire a diversity inclusion initiative at your organization, to have a culture where it's okay to make things better. We had another hand raised over here. Anyone else? Raise your hand. We'll know to send the mic up to you next.
Hi, my name is Jessica. I work at IUPUI, which is a university in Indianapolis, Indiana, and we actually have an entire division dedicated to diversity, equity, inclusion with full staff. We have a vice chancellor of diversity, equity, inclusion who sits at the cabinet level of the university, and they're highly engaged in the hiring process. They make recommendations to bring in diverse candidates, which, being on the other side of the hiring pool, brings us just an awesome pool of folks to choose from. But then we also have kind of 3-day mini workshops on a variety of topics. We have about a dozen of them a year. And they're intensive workshops on race relations, gender, sexual identity, religion, and it's really small cohorts, and a lot of administrators encourage the staff to go. So we don't have to take PTO, like we can miss 3 days of work and we can go to that. But creating that culture where the administration supports us doing that, I think is why diversity, equity, inclusion is so just central to our identity as an institution.
Fantastic. So what I'm hearing you is there's awareness, there's tools for raising awareness, and it's accepted to be a part of your work schedule. So you're basically paid to learn and raise your awareness of how to be a more inclusive and diverse culture. So we have one more final hand at the end. This is going to be our final shared inspiration, and I'll give you guys some closing comments and announcements that you'll want to hear.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Shepard. This is my first year here at the Green Sports Alliance Summit. I'm really excited to be here. I have a little flip side story. My background is all in traditionally male-dominated industries. I've worked in the car business back in the 80s and the early 90s. I work in an industry now that is heavily male-dominated. I don't see much of this going on in my day-to-day life. It's an eye-opener. I also work for a relatively newer company that is small. We happen to have mostly male employees. I don't think it's intentional, but it's always fun to come to something like this that is completely counter to my day-to-day. You get very busy in your own insular environment and you sort of deal with it, but it's always fun to know that there's another way to do it. And I mostly just want to say thank you to everyone on the panel. It was extremely enjoyable. I was watching and listening to every minute of it, so thank you.
And what I hear there is that organizations can create a culture of asking for another perspective and asking, hey, here's what I want to do. Is there another way to do it? And just creating that as a space of acceptance. Well, thank you all for those of you that sat down early, have stayed through, especially big gratitude for our panelists. Rushed in the beginning, so I wanted to kind of leave you with a couple closing comments on why it's important to us at the Green Sports Alliance, and that ultimately, as I said, you're here. I'm making the assumption you're here because you care, and we are dedicated to bringing together people who want to innovate and move the needle in green sports. And we cannot innovate unless we are including every member of our community. We can't have a healthy and green community unless we're including and maximizing the perspectives of everyone involved. And so at the Green Sports Alliance, we started with the women's sports and environment and quickly realized it is a conversation of diversity and inclusion. And so for us, creating multiple touch points, dedicated times to reflect on the different perspectives that we as a movement get to have, such that we can bring diversity, bring inclusion, and green together in ways that we've never experienced before. Because if it's to be, it's up to us. We're going to be the ones to find out how to do that. So cultivating and sharing examples of what works and bringing those thought leaders together to have conversations about what the challenges are. That's what we do around green, and we're also committed to doing that internally and reflexively on how we do that inclusively. So Women's Sports and Environment Symposium is a dedicated event for the women's conversation. Join us again on Thursday on the main stage for an overall diversity and inclusion conversation. And we've actually formed a diversity and inclusion committee at the Green Sports Alliance that's responsible for looking at our internal practices, what we're contributing to the movement, but also looking at opportunities for partnerships with organizations that are working in the diversity and inclusion space. How can we be their environmental experts? How can we look at social justice and environment? And how can we really be a progressive, leading edge, innovative group of people moving the needle on green? So that's our commitment to you. Thank you for your part in that conversation, for your willingness to grow. If you have any other questions or follow-up, I'm available. Danya, raise your hand. Danya is a member of the Green Sports Alliance staff. She's actually the staff member supporting the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. So any questions, any resources that we mention, or contacts or information you have, Danya's the best person to go to. You're doing great work, Danya. And I offered you an announcement sheet. I have several of them, so let's see which ones. So as I said, come back Thursday for the diversity and inclusion. Make sure to love up on our panelists with not, let them breathe a little bit, but give them lots of love too. So right now, something really cool, three announcements. 2:30 to 4 p.m., we have the Autonomous Vehicle Showcase with the Sacramento Kings on the plaza outside the arena. It's the latest autonomous vehicle technology. How many of you have driven in an autonomous vehicle? Exactly. Get out there. It's pretty cool. I didn't see any hands raised. If you raise your hands over here, sorry, I didn't turn my head. It's the latest AV technology from Audi, EasyMile, Renovo, and Uber will be on display to show the possibilities of making fan transportation to events more safe and sustainable. We also have a networking break on the concourses. Coors Light sports bars open. So those of you that drink beer, go get it. And it's an autonomous vehicle, so we're being so safe right now. You guys are good. This evening, we're asking you to come back. That's when we have this room even more flowing with Chris Granger, President and CEO of Kings, Mayor Daryl Steinberg of City of Sacramento, and Vivek Ranadive. Joel's going to correct me on that. Okay, good. That was okay. Owner and chairman of the Sacramento Kings. So we're having another kickoff celebration this evening. We also have an interview with Bill Walton. So excited for that. Who doesn't want to hear? He was here earlier. And our opening night reception. So did I miss anything? Okay. Any questions? Natalie or Danya? I'm absolutely grateful for your time. Thank you very much. I look forward to working with you throughout the year. Woohoo!
Clean anything up? Nope, you're good. You want me to clean up anything for you? You got me announcements.
Hey everyone, if you've signed up for a tour for California's safe soil in particular, please head to the registration desk, and those are going to be leaving momentarily.